399 BC, in the heart of ancient Athens, a city radiant with marble temples, intellectual debates, and the bitter ashes of war. A man stood on trial. His crime was not murder, theft, or treason, but the relentless asking of questions. His name was Socrates. To some, he was the wisest man in Greece. To others, a dangerous influence corrupting the youth and mocking the gods. This is the story of his trial, his death, and the philosophical legacy and changed the world. The Athens that judges Socrates was a city in turmoil. Just a few years before, it had suffered a catastrophic defeat in the Peloponnesian War against Sparta. Democracy was suspended, replaced by an oligarchy known as the Third Tyrants, who ruled with cruelty and terror. When democracy was finally restored, once still festered, there was paranoia, resentment, and fear. Many citizens wanted to purify the city, to rid it of threats, real or imagined. And in this tense atmosphere, Socrates stood out like a sore thumb. Socrates was not a teacher in the traditional sense. He wrote nothing, had charged no fees. He walked the street barefoot, engaging people in conversation. Political, craftsmen, gentle, and poets all were fair game. Through a style of questioning now called the Socrates method, he exposed contradiction in their belief. I know that I know nothing, he famously said. Yet his humility hid a dangerous edge on that made the powerful uneasy. He often embarrassed those who pretended to know what they did not. Over time, this created enemies with influence. In 399 BC, Socrates was formally accused by three citizens: Meletus, a poet; Lycon, an orator; and Anotis, a powerful politician with a grudge. The charges were impiety, not believing in the gods of the city, introducing new divinities, and corrupting the yoke. These were not trivial offenses in Athens. Religion was inseparable from civic life, and the future of the city depended on its young men. A trial date was set. Socrates, now 70 years old, would defend himself alone. Athens' trial was swift and public. The jury was made up of 500 on randomly selected male citizens. There were no judges, no lawyers, just the accused and his accusers. Socrates stood alone before the jury, unfair, speaking in the plain, ironic style he was known for. His goal was not to win favor, it was to speak the truth. Socrates denied the charges. He claimed he was on a divine mission, that a divine sign, a daemonian, had guided him all his life. He admitted to questioning and provoking, but instead it was the god of the city. He challenged Meletus directly. If all Athenians improved, the youth and only Socrates corrupt them, does that not seem absurd? If they corrupted them unintentionally, Why not correct him rather than punish him? He told the jury he would rather obey the gods than obey men, even if it meant death. The jury retired. Votes were cast. Black and white pebbles dropped into urines. The result: guilty. 280 votes to 221. Socrates was found guilty of impiety and corruption. Now came the penalty phase. According to Athenian law, Socrates could propose his own punishment instead of begging for mercy. He joked that he should be rewarded with free meals in the Parthenon, the dining hall for heroes. His sarcasm cost him. The jury recovered and voted for death, this time by a much wider margin. A scared sheep had just departed for Delos, and no execution could be carried out until it returned. Socrates waited in prison for 30 days. His friends came daily. Plato offered an escape plan. Bribes had been arranged, sheep were ready, but Socrates refused. He said he had lived under Athens' law and would not betray them now. To flee would contradict the very principle he had lived by. He spent his final days in conversation, discussing the soul, the afterlife, and the nature of virtue. The scared sheep returned on his final day, surrounded by his friend. Socrates remained calm. The jailer brought the cup of poison, a mixture of hemlock. Socrates drank it without fear. He walked until his legs grew heavy, lay down, and gradually his body turned cold. His final words, recorded by Plato, were, "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. See that it is paid." Asclepius was the god of healing. To Socrates' death was no curse, it was a cure. Plato never forgot that day. He dedicated his life to preserving Socrates' words, shaping them into dialogue that would become the foundation of Western philosophy. The Athenian public in time grew ashamed of the verdict. Statues were raised. His accuser faded into disgrace, but the damage was done. A democracy, at the height of its frugality, had silenced its wisest voice. The trial of Socrates became a warning of what happens when fear and conformity overpower reason. Across millennia, Socrates' death echoed. Renaissance scholars saw him as a symbol of intellectual courage. Enlightenment thinkers involved him in defense of free thought. Martin Luther King Jr. quoted him from Birmingham jail. Gandhi saw him as a kindred spirit. Socrates became the philosopher martyr. Proof that truth has a price and that conscience cannot be coerced. Though he wrote nothing, his words live on in every classroom, every protest, every question that dares to challenge power. Socrates died in 399 BC, but he lives in every corner of our intellectual world. He taught us that to question is not to destroy, it is to understand that a life unexamined is not worth living, and that integrity is measured not in safety, but in truth. The judgment of Socrates was more than a verdict. It was a mirror held up to society, reflecting not just on man, but all of us. And so the question remains, would we have condemned him too?